I am Adria Johnson, President and CEO at Metro United Way, where we are more focused than ever on three priorities: thriving kids, strong households, and an equitable community. I am thrilled to announce today's guest speaker, Emily Bingham, to discuss her book, My Old Kentucky Home. I want to take the time to thank the LG&E Foundation for their partnership, commitment, and dedication to equity for the 2023 Beyond Buzzwords Speaker Series. We could not do this without your support. This series, this year, we have been able to hold conversations with Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and Sally Kahn about important topics and critical issues affecting our community. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from our own Louisville native, Emily Bingham, to add to the Beyond Buzzwords speakers list. We are thrilled to have nearly 200 people that have registered for today's event to listen to Emily as she discusses Kentucky's state song. In My Old Kentucky Home, Emily explores the long, strange journey of what has come to be seen by some as an American anthem, an integral part of our folklore, culture, customs, foundation, a living symbol of a happy past. But My Old Kentucky Home was never just a song. It was always a song about slavery, with the real Kentucky home inhabited by the enslaved and shot through with violence, despair, and degradation. I am curious to hear more about this, as it is vital to confront our past and how we can leverage it to do better and to make positive changes in our future. So thank you again to everyone for joining us today for this important discussion. It is now my pleasure to introduce Nicholas Spalding, Electrical Engineer 3 at LG&E. Nicholas?
Hey, thank you. Hey, everybody. My name's Nick Spalding. I'm an engineer in electric distribution operations for LG&E and KU. Our team's responsible for the safe and reliable operation of the electric distribution system, which are the power lines that feed neighborhoods and businesses. Fun fact about me is I was a campaign champion from LG&E and KU for Metro United Way back in 2019. So I actually worked at Metro United Way a couple days each week throughout the fall of 2019, helping to raise money for some of the different accounts across Louisville. So some of y'all may remember me. But enough about me. So on to the keynote speaker. Born in Louisville, Kentucky, into a journalism family, Emily early on decided she wanted to write. Among her grade school efforts was a poem inspired by a typewriter her father gave her as a child, and on which he typed bedtime stories as he told them. Her poem, Typewriter, weighed the options: poet, novelist, journalist. The opportunity to dig deep into the past to tell true stories that shine a light on how we got here came later when she caught the bug for archival research and enrolled in Chapel Hill's U.S. History doctoral program. Emily is currently visiting honors faculty fellow at Bellarmine University. Her essays, articles, and reviews have appeared in Vogue, Ohio Valley History, the Journal of Southern History, Newsweek, Wall Street Journal, and New England Review. Her books are Irrepressible, The Jazz Age Life of Henrietta Bingham, Mordecai, An Early American Family, and as editor with Thomas A. Underwood, The Southern Agrarians and the New Deal, Essays After I'll Take My Stand. In her newest book, My Old Kentucky Home, Bingham offers a deeply researched as well as a personal and incisive biography of one of America's most iconic melodies. In this resident history, we see the enduring ability to forget and deny the realities of slavery, and Bingham, by casting an unflinching eye on our cultural inheritance, leads us to the promise of a reckoning. After Emily's keynote presentation, she will be joined by today's moderator for Q&A, Trent Finley, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Metro United Way, who provides leadership and oversight for Metro United Way's strategic direction to infuse an equity lens throughout the internal and external work led by the organization. Please join me in welcoming Emily Bingham.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Nicholas and Adria. And I'm so looking forward to this. This is an incredible opportunity for me to speak to my community and just a broader group of people who might not have heard the story I have to tell. And I want to thank all of you at Metro United Way for the work you do every day, which is just so vital. I do want to mention before I start my presentation that we're leaning into some hard history together today, and I really appreciate you coming on that journey with me. There are some words and some images that may be challenging and make some of us uncomfortable, but I hope that in the interest of education and understanding our common past, that you will understand why I've included them. So I will start sharing my screen. So here I am as a girl, and this is my grandfather. He took me to the racetrack. He taught me how to place a bet at the betting window before I could even reach that high or see over it. And he loved my old Kentucky home, and I loved him. And when I would hear the song, it would just remind me of how he made everything fun. And music can really be magical that way. It connects us over time and with feeling. Now, people assume that Stephen Foster, or the person who wrote the song, My Old Kentucky Home, was from Kentucky. But in fact, he was born and spent most of his life in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was only 22 years old when his song, Oh, Susanna, traveled the globe in one of the first pop song hits in history. Only 5 years later, he produced My Old Kentucky Home. And he died a very young person still in New York City, impoverished with just a few pennies in his pocket. Now, there is no doubt that Stephen Foster had a genius for melody. And the idea of home has universal appeal. And those are reasons, some reasons why I think the song has survived as long as it has. But Stephen Foster wrote hundreds of songs, many of them with titles like Mary Loves the Flowers, and another of my favorites, Mother, Thou Art Faithful to Me. But it was only his blackface minstrel songs, like My Old Kentucky Home, that earned Stephen Foster any real money. In the 1850s, blackface superstars like this group, Christie's Minstrels, were extremely popular. And you can see here that they put their name on Foster's sheet music for My Old Kentucky Home. They also had an exclusive deal to perform My Old Kentucky Home before it was available to be bought with the public. And they were performing to 1,500 people every day, 7 days a week, every week of the year in New York City on Broadway. So I find that people often don't have a very clear idea of what blackface minstrelsy is. In the 1830s, a white man named T.D. Rice invented a character called Jim Crow. Now, Jim Crow was T.D. Rice himself, just in black makeup with raggedy clothes, doing what was called an uncouth dance and singing nonsense lyrics. It became an international sensation, and Rice inspired hundreds and hundreds of other white men to follow in his footsteps, creating eventually these blackface minstrel troupes. Now, this was our country's most popular form of entertainment in the 1850s and beyond. And it was also this country's most important cultural export to the world until And maybe you guys can think for 1 second, what would be the next thing that would kind of replace blackface minstrelsy as the symbol of American culture? And I'll answer for you. It was jazz. Now, I did not learn that in school. Blackface performances stereotyped Black people as happy, singing, silly, poor, uneducated, entertaining, and much worse as well. These images were embedded very deeply in American culture. So deeply that in the later 1800s, when real Black performers were permitted on American stages, like the Calendars minstrels here, white people who controlled those stages expected them to match and enact these kinds of stereotypes. And I'm sorry to say that children were brought into these performances. Here you have the picture of a slave auction. A man in the center is being taken from his wife and children. This was produced for a show, a slideshow popular at the time called a lantern slideshow that literally illustrated the song, My Old Kentucky Home. That's because My Old Kentucky Home is undeniably about slavery, about the slave trade. And that is nothing to celebrate. So let's walk through it for just a moment. Here I have the lyrics of Stephen Foster's My Old Kentucky Home. In the first verse, as many of you will already know, the sun is shining bright. It's summer, and consequently, the darkies are gay. Something happens, hard times come. It's not quite clear what, but by the second verse, it is clear that the darkies have to part. And by the third verse, you have the narrator in the land where the sugarcane grows, wishing for death and deliverance, and still thinking of his plantation home in Kentucky. Now, interspersed with that, you have that gorgeous chorus, but it has the narrator wishing himself back on the plantation. In fact, Kentucky was the second largest supplier of human labor to the sugar and cotton camps of the Deep South. Prices for human beings nearly doubled in the 1850s, making this a very lucrative business. Being sold downriver, that expression, that originated here because the Ohio River helped move those 80,000 souls. That's about, this is a pretty hard number to conceptualize, I find, but that's about the number of the population of Bowling Green today. If you were enslaved in Kentucky in the 1850s, you had a 1 in 2 chance of losing a parent or a child in this way. Real people ensnared in slavery resisted in small ways and large, but not in this song. Here you do have an image of someone resisting. This is Margaret Garner of Boone County, Kentucky, with her family crossing the frozen Ohio River by foot from Covington to Cincinnati. This story inspired the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel Beloved by Toni Morrison. And some people want to ban that novel from our school libraries because they are concerned that it might make young people in school uncomfortable. Now, I don't care when your family came to the United States. Everyone living here needs to know this history. My ancestors owned people, but we didn't talk about it. And neither did anyone take the trouble to explain to me what the Derby song meant. It would just materialize at that glorious moment of moments every year after all the build-up to the horse race, when the thoroughbreds step onto the track for the longest running sporting event in the nation, right? And the world's most important race, the Kentucky Derby. The University of Louisville Cardinal Marching Band strikes up in unison, and 150,000 people, more or less, rise and sing. There is nothing like it. Sports Illustrated's writer Frank DeFord called it a moment when history and beauty bisect for an instant. Many people weep, and I did. What, though, in God's name, did my tears mean? How to explain that so many people forgot what the song was about, or if they knew, they didn't talk about it? To answer questions like that, I did what I know how to do. I decided to research. And this is just a picture of one day in my research process in Pittsburgh at an archive that holds a great deal of Stephen Foster material. But I'm glad to share with you a little bit of what I learned. Things were pretty wild in Kentucky at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. Here you have the Hatfields in 1897. Talk about gun culture. Everyone all over the country was reading about the bloody feuding in Kentucky's mountains. In 1900, the governor-elect of Kentucky was assassinated on the Capitol grounds of Frankfort. And in the southern part of the state, vigilantes were putting the torch to barns full of valuable tobacco crops. Kentucky looked like a dangerous place to live, to do business, and maybe even to visit. This was also an era when leaders in Kentucky and across this country rejected the possibility of a multiracial democracy. They passed laws and instituted practices to maintain a white supremacist social order. Jim Crow, not coincidentally named after the same character we just talked about, invented by T.D. Rice in the 1830s, Jim Crow was designed to be humiliating and to rob African Americans of access to political power, jobs, public spaces, education, wealth, and justice. But wherever Kentuckians went, people would ask them about that old song, the one about the Kentucky home. One commentator in the early 20th century remarked that my old Kentucky home brought more positive publicity to the state than any other one thing. Business and political leaders figured that an attraction honoring Stephen Foster and his beloved tune could help turn the state's image around. There was one problem. The home that the song discusses over and over again is a slave cabin, the one that he's being taken from. Not quite the image that Kentucky leaders had in mind for to attract people from outside to Kentucky. Now, that didn't stop them. Maybe some of you have seen this. Maybe some of you have even been there. In the 1920s, those same leaders found a big house in Bardstown. The old Kentucky home opened 100 years ago exactly in 1923. At the time, it was referred to as the happy home of slavery. People, anybody could now come see the very spot where Stephen Foster wrote his timeless melody. Now, this was a hoax. Stephen Foster did not write that song there. In fact, he never was there. But it didn't matter. Soon the song would become the state's official anthem, and the Derby song, like we've just discussed, replacing the Star-Spangled Banner for the parade to the posts. Now, tourists came to see this house, the old Kentucky home in Bardstown, because my old Kentucky home already lay so deeply in the American DNA. People could see it at the movies here in 1935 for a movie set in Kentucky after the Civil War called The Little Colonel, which stars the highest paid actor of the time, Shirley Temple. Also, Bill Robinson using his trademark stare dance to cheer up a sad little girl was just one example. And we'll look at a short clip from that film.
Uncle, they're beginning to way to go upstairs.
Now you just watch. I went to the market to get some beef, and the beef so tough, and I couldn't get enough. I paid $5 for a great big hole, and the hole so fat, and I couldn't get that.
Americans also heard the song in cartoons like Southern Fried Rabbit, in which Bugs Bunny changes his fur from gray to brown, a kind of bunny brown face, and strums My Old Kentucky Home to soothe the fire-eating Confederate veteran Yosemite Sam, who seems to have forgotten that the war is over. Colonel Sanders used the song to sell fried chicken. Now, My Old Kentucky Home sounded different to Black people. Muhammad Ali never sang it. All the students at Central High School here in Louisville, where Ali graduated in 1960, knew that the song was demeaning. That's not our song, his friend Bob Coleman once told me. That's a white song. In 1986, following an incident involving Japanese students singing the song, the Kentucky legislature officially removed darkies from the lyrics. It became "The people are gay," and the head must bow and the back will have to bend wherever the people may go. Now, this was a triumph of sorts, even if the lyrics remain a little odd, because of the complaints over generations from Black Kentuckians and civil rights organizations. And I should say that in some parts of the state, the schools and also Churchill Downs had already cleansed the song, putting the subject of slavery safely away. But while Foster's original version whitewashed slavery, this cleaned up version ghosted it. Still, shadows lingered. It was 2002. The trumpeter Wynton Marsalis was fundraising for his Jazz at Lincoln Center. He came to the Derby to play My Old Kentucky Home alongside the Cardinal Marching Band, which has played the song every year since 1936. The horses were being saddled in the paddock when an official handed Marsalis a card with the music on it to clip to the end of his instrument. And this is what Wynton Marsalis said. "What is this bullshit? What is this lyric right here? I am not playing this shit on national television." No one quite knows whether Marsalis, after this argument with his manager, actually did play or just pretended to play his trumpet that day, or no one but Wynton himself, I should say. In any case, someone had forgotten to forget what the song was about by handing him that card. In South Africa, they don't sing a song about apartheid at their cricket games. And in Germany, people don't swoon over a tune about the Holocaust when they go to soccer matches. But here in Kentucky, we have enshrined a song about slavery. Here's a video from 1988.
It's senior night at the University of Kentucky as the Wildcats honor 5 seniors, and now one of the most emotional moments in sport. Former Governor A.B. Happy Chandler to sing My Old Kentucky Home. The sun shines bright in my old Kentucky home. 'Tis summer, the people are gay. The corn tops rise and the meadows in the blue, while the birds make music all the day. The young folk.
There are lots of ways to consume a song that is passed down with love and stamped with official approval by governments, schools, and universities, and the world's most famous horse race. You can decorate your house with it. You can wear it on your back. You can sip out of a glass that says My Old Kentucky Home. It's even on some of the coins of our realm. For the corporations and institutions that keep it going, My Old Kentucky Home is a respected tradition and a valuable asset. I call it My Old Kentucky Home economics. But who benefits and who and what has it helped bury? I would never say that it's wrong to love a song, but we may commit wrongs when we don't understand the things that we claim to love. This 1941 hand-painted plate was sold in large series in upscale shops in New York City. It makes eminently clear who is comforted and who is doing the comforting in My Old Kentucky Home. A song about the cruelties of slavery has almost never been about acknowledging that cruelty or its victims. We like to pride ourselves on our hospitality, our warmth, and good manners here in Kentucky, but politeness has never prevented racism, whether in policing, schooling, banking, the courts, or politics. It doesn't stop racial stereotyping or the erasure of Black history in our communities. We don't need inauthentic tales that gloss over reality. People want the truth. Fantasies, as the poet Claudia Rankine has said, cost lives. Here is another Kentucky home. It belonged to Breonna Taylor, and it's riddled with LMPD bullets. Lies harm us all. And the truth is that in 1853, a white man from Pittsburgh needed to turn a buck. That, not Kentucky's beauties, inspired My Old Kentucky Home. Its celebratory and patriotic performance in white-controlled spaces, which in Kentucky is a lot of them, if not all, is, I believe, an act, even if unwitting, of white supremacy. Why, one of my Black friends once asked me with hurt in her voice, why do you all hold on to it so hard? When Dorian Hairston was captain of University of Kentucky's baseball team, he objected to My Old Kentucky Home being played at games. Now this Lexington teacher and poet leaves Rupp Arena when the band plays the anthem. What if, Hairston asked, the state song reflected my belonging as a human being and not someone who was owned? But is Kentucky the only state with a problematic song or symbol? Hardly. Virginia had Carry Me Back to Old Virginny, another blackface minstrel song that idealized the plantation. And that was until 1987. Maryland had the Confederate battle hymn, Maryland, My Maryland, sung to the tune of O Christmas Tree, in which Abraham Lincoln is portrayed as a tyrant. This song was played every year before the Preakness, which many of you know is the second race in the Triple Crown. The University of Maryland band stopped performing Maryland, My Maryland in 2017. In 2020, the owners of Pimlico Racetrack dropped it during the Preakness. And in 2021, the legislature retired the song. A state song shouldn't require a 30-minute lecture from a history professor or a musicologist, as one of my colleagues, historian Stephen Saunders, said at the time. 100 years ago, Kentucky turned a song into a monument, took it as its brand. Eleanor Roosevelt used to say, "Study history realistically. You'll love your country or your state just as much." Kentuckians and its business owners, politicians, and universities will decide what best represents our beautiful and complicated state for the century to come. One little song packaged slavery's brutality for the emotional and material benefit of white people. In the end, listening in to that truth is not about personal uplift or assuaging guilt. Guilt gets us nowhere, or even better marketing. It's about decency and respect, and it points to the much greater and ever-evolving work of reckoning that lies before us all. Thank you so much. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Emily. And as a reminder, if you have a question for Emily today, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can. And if you have a question that does not get answered and would like us to respond, please email us at events@metrounitedway.org. All right, Emily, so for our first question from the audience, can you discuss any unexpected ways the song has influenced American society and attitudes toward race and identity?
Wow, unexpected ways. I mean, it has certainly portrayed Kentucky as a place of a happy past, I think. And of course, there are many happy things in Kentucky's past. But by doing so with a song in these roots, I think it's, done that with, there are great complications to that choice, obviously. One little incident might kind of answer this question. In 1968, presidential candidate Richard Nixon came to the Derby, and he told the press at the time that that singing My Old Kentucky Home was his totally favorite part of the whole thing. And that, I believe, was telegraphing to the millions of people, watching and whoever was paying attention to his comments, that, that he was siding with a song, which at that time was clearly using a racial slur that everybody knew was offensive to Black Americans. And so that kind of signaling is just one way that an official who did win the presidency, signaled his disrespect for Black lives and Black feelings in the past.
Okay. Were there any stories from your research that resonated with you on a personal level?
Oh, man. So I didn't put this into the talk directly, but throughout the book, there's first person because I felt like it was, and stories about my family's involvement with the song over the generations, right? Going way back. And I did that because I want to be very clear that I am not claiming some purity. I mean, we all have inherited the nation we have, and it's up to us to decide the nation we want now. But the past is there, and I wanted to try to look at it in my own family's story. So, for instance, in the 1890s, there was a reunion here in Louisville, Kentucky, for Confederate veterans, and they were welcomed to the old Kentucky home. I mean, that was literally, all over the, sort of publicity for this huge gathering of thousands and thousands of Confederate veterans. And I learned in researching that event that my own great-grandfather, Robert Worth Bingham, that he had competed to be the president, or I don't know what the term was, for the Sons of the Confederate Veterans Organization. He was the son of a Confederate veteran and a slaveholder. And that he himself would have been dancing at the Lost Cause Ball, where the band, a black band made up of black performers from Louisville, played My Old Kentucky Home. And that kind of detail where I just wanted, I was not shocked, but it was a kind of level of texture to the way that the song wraps around my own and so many people's lives over the generations.
Just a few more questions here. And as a reminder, place your questions, if you have them, for Emily in the chat. Emily, were there any challenges you faced while writing this book, and how did you overcome them?
There's always challenges in writing for me in any book. The one thing that I would say that was a great blessing was that so many, not enough, but so many newspapers have been digitized, and I was able to trace this song, in that way, in ways I would never have been a generation ago, to find needles in haystacks, and especially Black newspapers. This is just a huge change in our ability to see the lives of other parts of our population that have been so hidden and so not looked at or understood. Personally, the biggest time of challenge was in 2020, because I was revising the writing. You have to turn these books in like a whole year ahead of time. So it's a long process, but I was revising, and that is when the Breonna Taylor story was revealed. And I think I was already very angry about some things from my own research, and feeling this need that white people like me, many of us have we don't want to feel bad, right? But I was feeling kind of bad about this song anyway. And then with that happening, it sort of blew everything up. And I was really, really angry. And I spent a lot of time outside in crowds trying to deal with that and do something that felt like it might matter. But in the end, I feel like that jolted our community, and it did make the process of writing the book feel, even more meaningful in a way. But it was a time of a lot of emotion, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have two questions that are similar here, so I'll kind of merge those together. Has there been, or is there legislation before Kentucky for removing this song? And second part of that question, how can we proceed with this removal if not?
Yeah. Well, I like to say that there are four main pillars holding up My Old Kentucky Home, I think, in our state. One is that it's the state song that's in the hands of legislature. There is also this house in Bardstown that continues to exist. It's a state park funded by taxpayers, where they do not sell my book, yet at least. And thirdly, there is the Kentucky Derby in Churchill Downs, right, where the song is seen and heard by millions and millions every year. And then finally, there is college and high school sports, and so the universities and schools where students are exposed to playing and singing the song all through their youth, and then fans are sort of imprint on it, right? All these great emotions and memories. So those are the four places where the institutionalization of the song is profound. And I think there are places where there's questions going on about that in those organizations, but it's very hard to let go of something that has been a successful brand and image. I think those organizations do need to know that there are people for whom that is not a successful image. I have yet to hear of a Kentucky politician coming out against the continuance of using the song in these settings. And I should also be very clear. I'm not saying that there is no place where people might want to sing My Old Kentucky Home. I really want to focus on these public spaces that are white controlled spaces. And I think, that's, My Old Kentucky Home is never going to go away. It is part of our history, right? And we should remember it. But I do think there's really serious room to reconsider its use in these settings. Like, for instance, an abolitionist did use the song, but he changed all the words and made them empowering. Joseph Cotter, who is an important educator in Louisville, Kentucky, in the 1920s, rewrote the lyrics for a Black educator. He rewrote the lyrics for My Old Kentucky Home. You can also see videos and music where the song has, like Tyler Childers, for instance. Just in 2021, he's a Kentucky country music sensation. He wrote a song called Long Violent History, which quotes My Old Kentucky Home to tell a very, very different story. So there are there's some resources there. I would be happy to follow up with there's a lot about how the South has been packaged and sold to the United States and made nostalgic. Karen Cox has a book about that. And then there's the crazy good book called Slave in a Box, about Aunt Jemima, which I think has some similarities to the way branding has been used racially to perpetuate stereotypes and perpetuate harms.
All right, thank you. And after completing your project, Emily, what lessons or takeaways do you think are crucial for readers to grasp about the cultural significance of My Old Kentucky Home?
Yeah. So almost nobody singing My Old Kentucky Home is thinking about slavery when they do it. I would invite you, if you do sing My Old Kentucky Home, to think about how it originated and got embedded and enshrined in this state. And by listening to that history, think about the other things that you may not know about, the sort of, I like to say, the graves that we step on, every day without being aware of. And it's not just about race, it can be a lot of other things. And just, I hope that, to me, it was a call to be more attuned and be able to listen to parts of the past that, are not maybe convenient to be listened to, but are absolutely essential for us to be open to hearing from one another in order to achieve the kind of society that I think everybody at the bottom truly desires, where we can respect and understand one another and talk to one another.
All right, thank you so much. If you have a question that did not get answered and you'd like us to respond again, please email us at events@metrounitedway.org. Thank you, Emily Bingham, for this important conversation with us and your time. Now we will hear closing remarks from Metro United Way's Chief Impact and Equity Officer, Robert Gunn.
Thank you very much, Trent, and thank you, Emily. As I always start out saying, it is a great day to be alive, and to any of our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters in the audience, es un gran día para estar vivo. Emily, want to say thank you very much for your words today and imparting some wisdom on the entire audience, especially me. I learned quite a bit today. I know at one point you quoted, I believe, former First Lady Roosevelt, but in hearing you speak today, one African proverb truly stood out to me, one that we taught students at the schools in which I've served in the past, and that is, until lions have historians, hunters will never cease to be heroes. And I think that proverb really stood out to me today, and it made me want to say thank you for the way in which you've imparted on your research and just how you are making sure that this story is being elevated, being told, and being understood for all audiences. So thank you very much for that. Also, I want to say thank everyone for participating and everyone that's donated to our DE&I work here at Metro United Way. Thank you to the LG&E KU Foundation. To learn more information and upcoming opportunities to engage with us in this important work, please feel free to visit our website at metrounitedway.org/DE&I. And also, before we go, we have some really exciting news to share. Please take a look at our upcoming 2024 Beyond Buzzword series. All right, so as you all can see, we have some amazing speakers for 2024. Please be on the lookout to register for our upcoming 2024 Beyond Buzzwords series at metrounitedway.org/Beyond Buzzwords. Also, in honor of Black History Month, we are excited to kick off with Heather McGee on Tuesday, February the 6th, 2024. We'll say that once more. In honor of Black History Month, we are excited to kick off with Heather McGee on Tuesday, February the 6th, 2024, to discuss her book, The Sum of Us: What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. We can't wait to see you there. Once more, on behalf of Metro United Way, thank you very much for joining us today for this Beyond Buzzwords series. Thank you again to Ms. Emily Bingham for presenting to us today. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day.